Welcome back to the Parent Edit Club Med podcast. Today I'm joined by Kira West and Shanti Kira, both stylish London mums, content creators and avid travellers. Today we have a lot of concepts around travel to talk about, primarily going to look at shared time and real memories in parenthood and how we weave that into travel. Thank you so much for joining me today, ladies. You are not both originally from the UK, Brooklyn and South Africa. What kind of experiences through your life as mums traveling and moving to different countries do you think shaped the kind of mums you are and like what you want for motherhood?
I don't know truly how long we'll be able to live here. And so presence was really the word that was on the top of my mind throughout my pregnancy, which really helped with some of my pregnancy anxiety and has also helped in motherhood because I really am trying to enjoy the moments for what they are. And so I think that really transcended as I thought about what type of mother I wanted to be. My goal and the reason why I do all the things that I do is because I want to be the most present mom possible. I'm not striving for perfect. I'm actively trying to just strive for being present. And I think the move here and knowing that maybe one day I'll go home to the US, which is not necessarily where I'd prefer to be, keeps me kind of in that mindset. And I think has just led to a really beautiful start to the journey for me.
South Africa to London, I mean, slightly different cultures, definitely better weather. How's London motherhood for you?
It's very different. So for me, I've lived in South Africa during my childhood. And then I spent some time in the US as well, and then moved to London. So my entire adulthood has basically been in London and in central London. So for me, it's the proximity to culture that's just insanely incredible. And at the same time, I'm kind of bringing back some sort of insights from my South African childhood in terms of the proximity to nature, the freedom, the liberation, the playfulness during childhood. And I really blend that in. And it's just amazing to combine that in London, I would say.
You are currently on maternity leave and you are working, raising your son. How do you fit travel in around that? I mean, maternity leave is great, but obviously your husband, he's not on paternity leave. So how are we making travel work?
It's tricky. I think maternity leave is an interesting time. In theory, you have a lot of free time and flexibility, but in reality, it feels like every day is millions of hours long, and taking care of a small child, a baby, especially for the first time, just takes a lot out of you. But I committed to keeping parts of myself that I felt really were important. I want my son to see the world. I want him to be comfortable in different environments. And so I was very clear with my husband too on wanting to travel. But it's tough to manage both my husband's work schedule, trying to also get my baby on some sort of a schedule. A good friend of mine once mentioned that this is the only time in life where your work tells you to focus on your family. And so I'm trying to make the most of it. And like I said, stay present. So whatever we can do with what we've got, we'll do. And, he'll be alive for many years to come. So there'll be more travel to come too.
Yeah, for sure. Your son's a bit older. So how was it for you in those kind of early days trying to keep travel as part of your life?
So we were traveling long before he was born. Yeah. And travel's been such a massive part of my life, especially going back to and from South Africa. My husband's German, so we go back to Europe and we have family all over the world. But we decided to do something really tricky. He was 2 months old and we took him on his first trip to Jamaica and to Germany. And then we decided to do a road trip when he was 5 months old to the US. We did 2 weeks between San Francisco and San Diego.
Wow.
It was insane and it was amazing at the same time. Very naive parents. I had a friend back then who told me, great advice, just keep traveling. When they're young, just do it because they're going to really adapt. And I saw that with my son. He's a very easygoing child, but he was such an easygoing baby as well. And he was just so adaptable and so resilient. We would take him to like the trendiest restaurant in Los Angeles and he would be sitting at the table with us, even on the center of the table. And then basically waiters and waitresses would be like, oh, he's so adorable. And he would just adjust. He'd have a nap or he'd just kind of observe. And it's just been amazing. That really carved out for me. That's how travel should be. You don't lose yourself as parents. You kind of let your child adapt with you and then you sort of pivot and make it about what they need as well. Obviously, as he grows older, he's now got a voice. He wants things done in his way. And, travel has to be pivoted towards his needs as well. But what's important is we never lost ourselves as parents. And we do travel in a way as a family that actually matches his needs and ours both. Because as you said, he's older, he goes goes to school, we kind of adapted around half term and term breaks. So it's mostly those times. But like last year, for example, we were really fortunate. We managed to travel every single holiday. And I did a trip with him solo to Asia, which was incredible, for 7 weeks to Australia and Asia. And it was spontaneous. And I learned so much about myself and him. So we just kind of do it in a way like this is such an integral part of who we are because it shapes us, and we're just going to keep going.
This summer, stop planning and start living. Club Med's all-inclusive family resorts take care of everything from gourmet dining to kids clubs and water sports. So all you have to do is make memories with your little ones. One destination, every adventure you could possibly imagine. That's Club Med. Search Club Med Family Holidays today to find your next perfect family holiday. What was the biggest lesson you learned from your first trip away with your son recently?
There's one in particular that sticks out to me. So middle of the night, when you want to do a diaper change, just on the bed with no pee pad, no changing pad, don't do it.
Yeah.
Because that's when your son's going to choose to pee on the duvet cover, thankfully on my husband's side. But in all seriousness, I think, to the point that was made earlier, right? Children are adaptable, babies are adaptable. And I think we spend a lot of time working up in our minds how intensive or scary or daunting the travel is going to be. And so I think it's important to set ourselves up for success and just start small and to just do it. And so for us, I think the biggest learning was very glad that we took this short trip. The whole point of our trip to Portugal was a trial. We had very few plans. We had some friends in the Algarve who showed us around, but it was very low stakes. We went to a resort that had a kitchenette so that we could store my milk easily and try and replicate some of the comforts of home. But we realized our son is adaptable. His naps may not be what they are at home, but it'll be fine. And it's important to prepare, but there's things that are going to happen outside of what you plan for. And so the more you do it, the more confident you'll get. The first plane ride, I was so nervous. The second one, a little easier. And I'm sure it'll just get easier from there.
Remembering that the tough times are just a tough moment. I have to say that to myself a lot on the plane. This is just a few hours of my life. And lo and behold, I don't ever look back and think, oh, that was a bad holiday. I always think, what an amazing holiday. On the plane ride, I was not saying that. In hindsight, I do say that was an amazing trip.
Yeah, not as relaxing.
Yeah.
In the same senses as our trips before, but really worthwhile and really rewarding.
I think you've got to let go of that notion of relaxation. But it sounds like your son was Mr. Chill on your travels.
He was really chilled. But I think it's about the parents. I strongly believe kids kind of adapt to the parents too. So if you're kind of a bit anxious and thinking, oh my gosh, how's this going to go? Do I have enough stuff? Do I need to go shopping? Do I need to make sure I have everything lined up? You can prepare, but you can't ever over prepare.
No.
So just have the bare necessities that they need. So for example, if the formulation can't be changed and adapted very easily because they might react, that's something important. But don't be concerned about, are they going to sleep in the sleepy head versus, a cot? That's little things that doesn't really impact the trip.
No.
And they just change and they adapt so easily. I had a friend who back in the day was kind of like, my daughter sleeps in the pram at a certain time. So we kind of followed Gina Ford a bit and took a bit of principles from her book and then adapted it. So our son was kind of like, I'm going to sleep anywhere,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if I'm in the pram or I'm in a car seat or in your hands. It really doesn't matter. And I think that's what's so key about traveling with a very young one. Just kind of make it easy for them and easy for yourself and less stress and less anxiety.
I don't think I took this seriously enough. I think I thought I was doing the naps in different locations well. But then because I mainly work from home, I spent a long time nailing the crib nap. And then I found myself with a child who wouldn't nap really on the go. And so with my second child, I'm like, right, every day, currently you take about 8 naps. So we are going to go car seat, bouncer, crib, pram, arms, and we're going to rotate this all day long so that you're thrown off guard at every one and you have to sleep in each of these locations because
Exactly.
I'm not having another child that won't sleep in a pram. How do you kind of carve out time to rest and recover on holiday?
I have to say at the beginning when we used to travel, it was always like travel's an escape. And this is a new concept I've kind of really been thinking about quite deeply. So in the past, it's like, so both my husband and I have corporate roles and it's quite intense. And as I said earlier, travel's kind of centered around half-term breaks or holidays. And then I realized, no, you know what? This is the wrong thing to do because you go away, you relax, you escape, you come back and you come back to the grind. and you're at it again. And within 1 week, your stress levels have just risen completely. And you're back into sort of this rat race. So I kind of reframed it in a way. And I'm more like, actually, what are we getting out of the trip beyond just relaxation? So what experiences are we really being exposed to on the trip that is actually going to shape the way we, sort of approach the tasks we have at home or our work or my son with school? And then it's kind of like, well, we need a bit of maybe some relaxation time. But actually, I do get more now, I feel, if I do a certain activity that's more immersive with culture, for instance, where I say, actually, I'm taking something back for sure. So it's not just about the escape anymore. So it's still carving out time, but in a much more sort of intentional way, in a bit of a different way, because in the sort of latter years, I would say when he was more around 5 or 6, he was going to the kids club, maybe, for example, when he was 5. And it would be like, well, we have 3 hours of time. Let's go get a massage, or let's lie by the pool, or let's just chill, And you come back and you think, actually, what did I really learn or accomplish on that holiday, aside from just relaxing? So now it's different. And that approach I find is incredible. So I call it formative travel. It's kind of like a framework I've built, and I'm really approaching it in that way.
What do you want your children to gain from travel? So you're saying about this formative travel, this experience, and kind of coming home and taking something away from that. Is that something you see yourself doing, like as your son gets older?
I love a framework. My goal is similar, right? Travel is something that we've always done and something that we've committed to doing, as we don't want to lose ourselves as parents. And I think one thing I love about culture outside of the US is that kids are encouraged to be a part of your life versus you having to give up your life because you had a child. So I think some parts of what we're looking for are definitely within that formative travel framework of like, what can we do to immerse ourselves in culture as a family, to build memories together? And then what do we bring back? What do we learn? I mean, I remember the first time I went on safari and saw animals in real life and how incredible it would have been. I could imagine, right, if you're learning about a giraffe or you're learning about a dinosaur and you're like seeing where some of these fossils are found, or you're getting to see that in real life. We want some of those experiences for our son that we didn't necessarily have. I also think as we think about relaxing and what that looks like, I do strive to build a life where relaxation is built in and breaks are built in. So it's not the only escape that we have, because that puts so much pressure on the trip. But I do find that at least at this stage, my son is about 4 months and change, having a structure and having a little bit of that framework going into the trip around who's going to support him when does help me and my husband get some true breaks. So I took a long nap, which meant I did have to pump in advance. We had to talk about it so my husband could wake up, but it all worked out. And so I think relaxing looks a little different. It may not be as complicated as it used to be, and it may not be, a full day of solo travel, but there are pockets that we can find. And I think that's also been a core part of our partnership, is just talking about what that looks like, and also realizing that not every trip is the same. So going on a beach holiday is going to be very different than going to see family in the States. So making sure we're realistic too about what we expect from the trips.
That's a really good point. I think that kind of realistic expectations about what travel looks like at different times of the year, in different locations, at different ages, your child or children. You managed to get some R&R time on your first trip.
I got a little bit.
Was it a bit of a shock to the system, or was it a pleasant surprise?
My husband took care of my son in the morning, and typically with our work schedules, that's not quite how it shakes out. And so it was a nice surprise. Something I would love for us to replicate. It's amazing what 2 hours of uninterrupted sleep can really do for a mom.
2 hours again.
Yes, especially a breastfeeding mom. I mean, it was incredible, but I didn't go into it thinking this is going to be super relaxing. I went into it thinking, how do we experience something different? And the goal was like, let's just get sunshine. Let's be somewhere new. Let's try something different. And it's going to be different as we travel with him as he grows. But overall, I would definitely say I got a little bit of R&R and just enjoyed the shakeup of routine and location.
If you've ever wanted a family holiday where everything is sorted, from the food to the dining to the kids clubs, then Club Med is it. From snorkeling to archery to canoeing, it's perfect for families looking to disconnect and reconnect with each other away from those pesky screens. Check out clubmed.co.uk today and treat you and the family to a premium all-inclusive summer holiday today. Your child is a little bit older now. Is there anything that you already notice he kind of looks back and says, like, that was a great holiday? Are you starting to see that kind of memory forming around family time and holidays?
Definitely, absolutely. Yeah. And there's certain sort of activities or locations where you think, oh my gosh, this was amazing. We've put so much effort into this, to plan it. Now he's obviously got his own sort of view and opinion. And it's like, well, actually, that wasn't my favorite trip. It might be something completely different because their worldview is so different in terms of their age, and the way we see things is so different too.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I would say, some things that for kids that really rings true that I found over the years is anything sort of experience led. So where there's something, a new sort of formative activity, like for example, it could be skiing or surfing or snorkeling or anything with an animal interaction is like massively a winner in terms of his memories.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not ever going to forget that. And then sometimes it could be the complete adverse. It could be like, well, remember that holiday where I had so much time on the beach, just to do nothing? That was so incredible too. And because he could just play in the sand or collect seashells, it's amazing that, what you kind of predict as a parent to be the sort of incredible holiday might be so different for them.
Do you find that you start to get a bit twitchy if you haven't been away for a while and you need to escape?
Yes,
for sunnier
absolutely.
climes?
I love London and it's amazing, all the proximity to culture, to history. But at the same time, I need a change of environments. I'm lucky I travel with work quite frequently, but it's different because work travel, you don't really get exposure to the places you're really going. So it's mostly boardroom meetings and then back again. So I love travel. And it's basically like, oh my gosh, where are we going to go? What are we going to experience? What are we going to see and learn that is brand new? Can we try something we haven't tried before that's on our bucket list for ages? And how is this going to change our perspective when we come back? So those kind of concepts are really important. And I just so look forward to it. Because my son is slightly older, when he was younger, it was, of course, more sort of Europe, keep things to under 4 hours in terms of flight time. But since he turned about 5, we've sort of been, well, let's get a bit further away and let's explore as much as we can.
Yeah, that's so nice.
I love that. So work travel for me, I found to be a bit exhausting before having kids because you're in meetings, you're working really hard. But now I'm starting to think, it could be a little bit of a break in some ways because now I have a job that's 24/7 and then I'll go back to work and have a job that's 40 hours a week. And so I'm curious if your perspective on work travel has changed at all since having kids, and like, does that solo time at all feel restorative? I would imagine, of course, like we all miss our kids when we're away from them, but a whole night of sleep, I could imagine would just be game changing.
That's a holiday in itself.
You're absolutely right. So my first trip, I was so anxious. I had set up my consultancy after taking maternity leave. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to go travel for the first time. It's being back in the corporate world after months off. And oh my gosh, how am I going to leave my, my baby with someone like the nanny, obviously, but still, how do I leave my baby with someone and just go away overnight? And my husband was obviously there, but it's different during the day because, it's sort of a different backup when you're there. But it was amazing. You've hit the nail on the head. It was so liberating, I would say. That's the word. It was the first time where I could say, oh my gosh, I have time for myself. Yes, I have to be at a meeting. And yes, I have to come back and prepare for dinner, but I have even that hour in between. I can make a coffee. I can have a glass of wine. I can go to bed whatever time I want. I come back to my hotel room and I can just read or watch a program or just relax, and that was amazing. Yes, I did have a lot of mom guilt in terms of leaving my son, but at the same time, it was so incredible to have that time off. I think the sort of juggle results, and obviously it gets a bit lighter as they get older, when your travel is sort of more demanding for work in terms of frequency. So if it's the occasional trip, it's fine, but when it starts becoming, sort of more like, oh, you need to go longer haul or you need to go more often, then it becomes a bit like, ooh, do I want to have more travel with my child or travel on my own? But definitely, it's so liberating.
I mean, any time away would be fantastic. Is there anything about living in London that you are conscious of that is very different to America that your son may or may not get here? Is there something that you would say is missing from kind of like London culture in terms of raising children?
I don't think so. I mean, my husband would probably say the accent. That's the only thing that London doesn't have. But we were really intentional about where we chose to live. And I love living in a part of the city that's central enough, but we can, see things that are in central London if we want to see the museums and things like that. But we're also far enough out that we're not in the congestion. And so I think we've really found a sweet spot. For me, safety was really important. And so that's something that just naturally the United Kingdom does far better than the United States. I also think, it's not that we're not going to go back to the US. It's not that we're not going to have family come here. And it's not that we have completely shut off the American part. So we'll see it. But I think this is going to be game changing in terms of just expanding his worldview. One thing I find challenging about a lot of folks within the US is just that they don't leave their small town. They don't leave their big town. And while it's a bit of a cultural melting pot, there's just so much that you get when you're put in a situation where you're within a different culture. You're hearing different languages. You're trying different foods. And I think that that's really accessible here, which we're excited about. Diversity was really important to us too, in terms of him seeing different people, different cultures. And so I think London has a lot to offer.
Do you think that raising your child in a country where you didn't grow up has made you more intentional about building this childhood that you want them to have?
Absolutely, in so many ways, because when I came to London, it was like, this is offering me something completely different. The culture, the diversity that you say, the safety, because South Africa that's the one factor that's sort of the downside, the safety aspect, which is why many people do leave, even though some do return back. But at the same time, I've now got that exposure of what it's like to live in South Africa, what it's like to be in the US, so I can sort of coin that together and say, well, actually, I know he's getting all of the culture in London, but he's missing proximity to nature, or he can have that playfulness, because something simple like starting school in South Africa starts at age 5 or 6. In the UK, it's 4. So that sort of, playful sort of nature that they need to have when they're younger sort of made me more intentional about how I sort of approach school, for example. He's at one of London's sort of top academic selective schools. He's done really well to get there. But at the same time, I took a very different approach. I was kind of like, well, I want him to get in based on his own sort of basis, his own knowledge, as opposed to sort of tutoring, which I know is a very competitive sort of culture in London. So I want him to have that playfulness when he's much younger, which is something that came integrated from my sort of exposure in South Africa. I was growing up close to the sea, close to the mountains, being able to surf, being able to swim, and just have lovely hikes in nature. So being able to get away, even if it's the English countryside or outside to Europe, is so important to me in terms of making sure he has that balance, that competitive edge that you need to have in London versus bringing those different worldviews that need to come into play. So you have that global exposure in the whole mix.
Ensuring that childhood is still central to his upbringing.
Exactly.
With all the opportunity that London brings.
Similar to New York as well, in terms of it being quite competitive.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Wanting to bring in some of that play.
Yeah.
I think as a child that grew up in the 80s and 90s, it's like we had a lot more of that outside time, that communal play. And so I too want that.
Any kind of like city living, there is always this like desire for a bit of escapism. I think when you have children, it offers so much, but also, as you say, like it just doesn't have that free rangeness that children need. They need to kind of run and play and
absolutely and
explore.
It's important in London because you can actually get sucked into it. When your son or daughters start going, to school, you will find that you're going to be maybe that relaxed parent, but it's so easy to get sucked into the culture of comparison. That's the reality in London. Everyone is really ambitious and driven and they want more for themselves and their families and their kids. And automatically, you can easily really get sucked up into that culture where it's like, oh my gosh, am I doing enough for my child? Should I be doing more? And that's where you'd start, needing to start thinking about what are my value sets internally? What do I want to hold for my family that's important to us? What matters to us, what matters for us now versus later. That's when that sort of intentionality comes in to play. And it's so important. It's sort of like your little sort of moral compass that is guiding you in your sort of parenthood journey, I would say.
Any kind of standout trips or traveller experiences that you look back on and say, so glad I did that. Club Med isn't just a holiday. It's where your family discovers something new every day. World-class resorts, unlimited activities, and everything all-inclusive. So the whole family is happy from sunrise to sunset. Your next great family adventure starts at clubmed.co.uk.
There's quite a few. I'm so grateful to have had so many experiences. I think a couple that stick out for me. One, toward the end of my college career, I took an opportunity to craft an internship with an organization in Australia. And so it was the first time that I'd ever been there. I knew no one, minus the one person that answered my emails from the organization that I was pitching to do like a social media consulting role for. I went for 5 weeks right before my last semester of college, and it was incredible, super transformative. I think to stand on my own 2 feet, to make friends, to be in such a different part of the world is something that I think really grew my confidence in a lot of ways. And I think solo travel in general was something that I did before I was breastfeeding. And it is always transformative. I love my husband, and one of the things that we love to do is travel together. But for me to go places alone, to experience things, and kind of to be able to have the freedom to do what I want when I want is beautiful. And so there are so many solo trips, I think, that have continued to just help me understand that that's a huge part of who I am. I'm introverted, shockingly enough. And so the time to restore is really important. But I've found that moving out of the US, moving to London in a place where I really am like pleased and enjoying where I live, I felt less of the need to escape and more of that just, loving being present. So I would say a mix of those. Antarctica's still on my list. So when we get there, that might be a top contender, but I'm not taking a baby to Antarctica.
No. Having just come back from a ski trip, I can confirm that keeping them warm is a challenge. What about you? Any standout trips that you look back on pre-having a child?
Yeah. So similar to you, I did a bit, not as much solo travel, but I did some massive sort of moves. So moving to the UK was a major move. I also traveled to the US and to the Caribbean, and that was lovely because it just got me feeling so spontaneous. It was like, let's just book a flight. Let's just go. And as we're there, we're going to map out, the sort of itinerary with my friends and decide where we stay. So we basically didn't book any hotels in advance and kind of just booked it along the way. Spontaneity in travel can also be so amazing. You can find things that you just didn't know existed. Used to do that a lot with my husband pre our son. We do that less so. We sometimes have the odd moment where we're like, well, let's just do it now, why not? With a kid, you do have to plan a little bit more, especially if you want to stay in sort of like ideal sort of hotels or have the ideal activities. But I do miss that for sure, the spontaneity around travel.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, definitely with a baby, we're not spontaneous at all. It's so difficult.
Because we can't be spontaneous when we travel with children. What would you say are your absolute non-negotiables to take?
So I would say something that they can build with, for sure. There's these little sort of cube blocks. I don't know the name offhand. I can't remember it, but it's incredible. It's just a tube of blocks that are tiny little blocks, and he can just spend hours just building. Using his imagination, it's sort of like almost like a bit of robotics concepts meets Lego. iPad with Kindle app on, so you don't need to carry a sort of a hard version of a book. Incredible. Some movies downloaded for when he needs it, but definitely reading as well. Pen and book, definitely. For kids that age, drawing, sketching, coloring, and snacks. 100%.
Right now I'm the snack.
Yeah, you are literally the snack. You're obviously like me in the thick of breastfeeding, which in a way makes travel a lot easier. It really does.
Yeah, that's why I stuck with it, actually. It was difficult in the beginning, but I'm like, I can do this. I'm going to stick with it because of travel.
What's your go-to baby products?
So I love these toys that stick on the tray table. So this one allows him to move a wooden loop around.
Yeah.
My son is still quite young, but he can chew on it, bite it, and it sticks so it doesn't fall, which is amazing. Nice. Having some sort of toy that will keep your child engaged between 4 and 6 months is usually really important. He's starting to teeth, so everything is going in the mouth, and he does start to get bored, which I think is great in some ways, right? Because I think boredom can produce imagination, and it is important as a part of childhood. However, on the plane, helpful to have. Bring the things that are essential, bring the things that you know that your child is really specific about, but other than like a specific toy, there's so much that you can get in destination. And we also are likely traveling to destinations that are a little bit more supportive at this stage. I'm not taking my baby on a safari in Uganda at this point.
No, I think do what you can to make life a little bit easy when they're really young, right? Future travel plans. What's on the horizon?
South Africa in 5 weeks. So we go back every year, and I can't wait. This year, though, what we have mapped is potentially also some other parts of Africa. So exploring a bit more, maybe more the East Africa region, which we've been to pre-kids, and definitely European summer for sure. Beyond the second half of the year, still to come.
TBC. What about yourself?
Yeah, so we just got back from the Algarve in Portugal. Very baby friendly, kid friendly, which was exciting. We're going back to the US in a couple of weeks, so that'll be great. And then going to Asia, going to Korea and Japan in April. So while it's probably a bit early to take quite a long flight, with our son, we're aiming for the 12 and a half hours to be as seamless as possible. So we'll see. But we're building up to it slowly. And then we actually want to stay around the UK peak summer. I think it's a beautiful time to explore, to stay local, to be outside. I can't wait until it's light, until 10 p.m. The second half of the year is also a little bit to be determined. We have Andalusia in May, so going to Spain. And then I've got a Maldives dupe that I'm really excited about that I'm trying to fit in. So we'll see.
Exciting.
But trying to make the most of it. And I think, your point around babies and children adapting, I think that sweet spot between 6 and 9 months where we can hold his head up, sit at the table, be trying foods will be a really great time for him to be with us on the go. So it's the goal.
Amazing. And where can everyone find you if they want to find travel tips, motherhood, life, London?
The Kensington Diary.
Kensington Diary and
At by K West, BYKWEST.
Thank you, ladies, for joining me. It's been really insightful and very inspiring to speak to you both. It's great to chat to like-minded women who are prioritizing travel in motherhood, because I know it can be really daunting for some people. So I think it's good to hear people who have a good experience and actively look for those kind of broad-ranging travel experiences. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having us.